Well, knowing that you're a runner, I kind of hate to admit this, but I used to hate exercise. And maybe it was 4 years ago, I decided I was going to get healthier, and that if other people could exercise, I could exercise too. So I went down to the gym and I found a trainer. And I thought, well, if I work the trainer, maybe I can stick with this. And it did make a difference, because there was somebody that I had invested money by paying him. There was somebody expecting me to show up. And then he knew what to do, as opposed to just me going in and looking at the machines. And I remember, about 2 months into it, Marcus was saying, you're just going to love what we're going to do next. You're going to love this next exercise. And I said, look, I hate to tell you, but for 40 years, I have hated exercise. And he said, you're going to learn to love it, man. You're going to learn to love it. Well, that's been about 4 years. And I admit that I've learned to love it. But the motivation was, I had him, right? It was another person. I pay him, so I've got money invested. He makes it fun. He makes it challenging. And I see results. So what about you? Do you have any motivation stories?
Well, I definitely can relate. I despise working on finances. I'm horrible with numbers. As a matter of fact, one of my colleagues today noticed me reversing numbers in live time and caught me on it, which I'm so grateful for. But trying to balance a checkbook, all that stuff is not fun for me. My motivation for that math work is being mindful that I can then do with my money different things. I can be a better steward of what I've been given. I can afford to go on adventures post-COVID when we can actually go on adventures. I can give gifts, and I can also be sustainable. And there's something really motivational to me to know that I can do this myself. And that level of independence that says I really don't need anyone else to do this for me. And so I'm very, very grateful for that.
Well, these are some tough topics in a way to tackle, like motivation. Where does motivation come from? Is it like a muscle? Is it a learned skill? How do we gain a level of perseverance that takes us through to accomplish what it is we want to accomplish?
Hi, I'm Holland Webb.
Hi, I'm Amy Boland.
And you're listening to The Afterword, a conversation about the future of words.
To help us navigate some of these questions, we have Lauri Yanis, Senior Vice President at Pioneer Valley Books, joining us at the Afterword table. Would you share us a little bit about what you're working on now and sort of what keeps you up at night?
So it's interesting because right before we came on air, I was thinking about what kept me up all night 9 months ago was COVID. And whether we were going to have work for our employees. So that motivated me to try to find solutions. As you said, I'm the Senior VP at Pioneer Valley Books. We are a literacy publisher, and we are focused on books and materials for readers and teachers in K-6, and specifically in the classroom setting. So we provide materials for classrooms, for classroom adjacent, this year for homes that are classrooms, for classrooms that are homes, wherever it is. And what keeps me going and keeps me working and keeps me focused on the projects that we do is I've been in management for all of my career life, more than 3 decades, except for this little tiny blip where I really thought I wanted to be a teacher. And I went to school and got a second degree to be an educator. And I loved learning to be an educator. And I was completely enamored of everything about the philosophies of education and all that. I just really hated being in the classroom. I'm going to give a lot of credit to Amy and Cece, who managed to have children and teach. That was not going to be an option for me. And it did come down to motivation. I found that I could not motivate 25 kids all day to be enthusiastic and caring members of a classroom community and come home and get my children, who were only 2 of them, to be enthusiastic members of my home community. But education mattered so much to me, and being a part of it mattered so much. And this position came up 18 years ago. Company was just barely getting started. And it was an amazing opportunity for me to pull together my skill set and my passion for managing people and working with people and managing a business and keeping track. I love numbers. So Amy, you're all set. But combining that with helping to make sure that people have really good teaching materials. And one of the things that I say, and we'll get to it even more when we talk about motivation, but in our company, we are not saving lives, but we are changing lives. And everybody who works with us and for us in our company, it's important to those of us at the executive level to make sure that they understand that that's what we're doing. So at Pioneer Valley Books, we're trying to change lives, and that can keep you up at night. Not as much as trying to save lives, but it can keep you up at night. So thank you.
Oh, I love that. Well, to help us also gather some additional clarity around this concept of motivation is Dr. Cece Bates. She is a professor of education and the director of the Clemson University Reading Recovery Training Center. Welcome to you, and tell us a little bit about what's going on in your world right now.
Thanks, Amy. It's good to be with you all today. I think if I had to answer what keeps me up at night, it is the work that we do at the center, which is focused on children who are having difficulty learning to read and write, and working with the teachers who are working with them on a daily basis. So, I guess what I would say is that, I'm weighing up Lauri's comments about, are we saving lives or changing lives? And I'd almost say, I feel like we're saving lives. Children who are having difficulty learning to read and write, sometimes this is their one shot at early intervention. And so we have this kind of laser focus on the work we're doing to make sure that when they get that shot, they've got a highly trained teacher who has the expertise to meet their needs and to accelerate their progress so that they are on a path to success. And literacy, in my opinion, is the key to all kinds of things, from social mobility to life success. And so because we see these children when they're young and they are typically excited, we really want to take advantage of those opportunities to work with them and to work with the teachers. So that keeps me up at night for sure. I mean, I feel like that's, a lot on our shoulders.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's actually motivational to hear. Before we go any further and before we really dive into these questions, would each of you be willing to share about a 60-second sort of Cliff's Notes version of your life so we understand who you are and the context that you're speaking out of? Lauri, can we start with you? And then Cece, would you add on? And then we're just going to dive right into the questions after that.
Sure. Thanks, Holland. Well, I think I touched on it a little bit kind of in my answer. So I think my work that keeps me up at night is a big part of kind of that 60-second picture of who I am. Professionally, I'm vice president of this publishing company, driving a whole team, building a company from, there were only myself and the owners when I first started 18 small years ago. And I came up through a lot of other things. Beyond that, I am the mother of 4, 2 of which I'm the primary operator on and 2 of whom I'm the secondary operator on. I am a wife. I am a former rower, competitive rower, and a former competitive coxswain. And I walk a lot, which I think we might come up to a little bit later when we talk about what that's about for me. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I love to walk too. Cece.
Okay, Lauri, that's so fascinating to me. I did not know that about you at all. I think that's so neat to learn. So I've known Lauri for years, but, just in 2 minutes of her talking, I found out some things that I would like to dig in personally a little deeper on outside the podcast. But I
see, that's what makes podcasting so much fun.
Right, I know.
You learn all kinds of things about people.
So I have an undergraduate degree in media arts. I did not initially go into teaching because both my parents were teachers and I swore I'd never be a teacher. So after I graduated from college, I kind of took an unconventional path and ended up working as a professional guide out west in the southern Sierra Nevadas, actually rowing on whitewater, taking customers on multi-day trips down the river. And so that's why I find that, I mean, it's a different type of rowing, but there is some similarity. And so we'll have to talk a little bit more about that later, Lauri. And I loved being outdoors. I loved leading people down the river, spending time with them, some of whom had never been outside before. That you would ask things like, where do I plug in my hairdryer? And we're in the middle of, a national forest. So anyway, I realized quickly that financially sustaining that type of lifestyle was difficult because there wasn't a lot of money in it. Not that there was much money in teaching, but if I went back to school and became a teacher, I could work out west in the summers on the river. So that's really how I got lured into the profession. And what I realized was I absolutely loved teaching. I think that I was doing a lot of teaching in my position as a raft guide, and I just didn't recognize it as such. But when I got into a classroom with young children, I just found my home. And I just was on this continual quest then to figure out how to meet the needs of my students. And that's really how I ended up getting a PhD in language and literacy at Georgia State many years ago. It really stemmed from just wanting to figure out what I could do with children in my classroom that were having difficulty, because at that time that was keeping me up at night too. So I got a PhD in language and literacy, and I consulted for years with school districts around the country. And about 12 years ago, got a phone call from Clemson, and it was just serendipitous. I've been here 12 years now. I teach graduate level courses in early literacy, and I direct the Reading Recovery and Early Literacy Center for Clemson. So that's a little bit about my history and how I have arrived at what I'm currently doing.
This is going to be a great ride. We're ready to strap in again and get going. Sounds like a lot of fun. So thank you both for sharing the little Cliff Notes version of your life. And I know we'll have a little bit later on, Cece, we can talk about your new book, and you can plug that because that's all exciting too, as I'm sitting here looking at it because I've got it in front of me.
Yay.
So as we get set off on this journey of motivation, we would like you to give us a working definition of some of these terms, because what we found in our experience as podcast hosts is sometimes we're talking about things that neither Holland and I have any experience with at all. And so if it just kind of helps level the playing field a little bit when we know the terms. So it doesn't matter who answers them, and maybe both of you answer, but just going to throw these out to you and just give us a little definition, a short snippet of what you think best describes these terms. The first one is self-efficacy. Go.
So I'm going to go because I was so excited when I saw this was on your list, because this is, for me, the key to managing people. For me personally. So self-efficacy is believing that you can do it. It's can do. I can do it. And for me, managing people and motivating people and managing kind of the movement of how people experience their jobs, which is what I find kind of so rewarding, is giving them self-efficacy and helping them understand that they can do it. And so when we are training new employees, we like to make sure that we layer that learning on and continually tell them that they can get to the next level and feel rewarded by it. So for me, I think I first heard that term in a business class when I was working on my degree, and it's just been with me ever since. So,
great. Anything to add, Cece?
I think for when we're thinking about self-efficacy for children, it's that belief that they are going to be able to control the outcome of their behavior or the task in which they're involved. And that confidence in that ability is huge in their success, especially as it relates to reading, and really feeds into then, for example, their expectations for the desired outcome.
There you go. That's our next term. So why don't you keep going on that one? Expectation of outcomes.
expectation of outcomes really is the perception of how something is going to turn out, so to speak. So there can be, a positive expectation for an outcome or a negative expectation for an outcome. And, it's really wrapped up in a child's self-efficacy. So if they believe that they can exert control over their motivation or their behavior, that is going to lead to a positive expectation of the outcome. Whether it's, engaging in a literacy task or some other behavior. For me, I'm always looking at this through the lens of children who are learning to read and write. But they're really closely related.
How about you, Lauri? Anything to add to that?
I also think that it's in the business setting as well, very tied together. The expectation of outcomes is, where do you expect someone to get to? What do you think they're going to get to? And bringing those two together, helping someone understand that they have what it takes inside of them to get to those outcomes. That's the expectation, and certainly expectation of the negative or positive. But I think most often in positive expectation of outcomes, and I think a lot about outcome expectation for me is about giving someone the address they need to get to. So you drive around, you went to this ice cream store and it was really amazing. And you drive around for about an hour and a half trying to find this amazing ice cream store, and you go down 6 wrong streets and eventually you get there. Or your girlfriend says, oh yeah, that ice cream place we went to, here's the address, and you put it in your phone and you're there right away. And so you have the expectation, as soon as you're given that address, you have the expectation of the positive outcome of the ice cream that you're looking forward to having. So I always try and think about it as, you want to give people the address you want them to get to, and give them that expectation of the positive outcome that way.
That's excellent. How about goal orientation?
I'll start, but I think Cece's going to bump in with a lot of the same thoughts on this, because this really is, for me, I think I picked up SMART goals when I was in my business degree, which came before my education degree. And then I went back, and in both, then they started talking about SMART goals. And I was like, well, no, that's a business thing. It's like, no, apparently it's not. And then it's funny, Holland at the beginning talking about exercise. And I, at a different time in my life, lost 85 pounds through the magic of, you got it, diet and exercise. And wouldn't you know it, my trainer starts talking about SMART goals. So apparently everybody is using it. So for your listeners who don't know what a SMART goal is, it's an acronym, which I like to talk in ABC soup all the time. So specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely or time controlled or time stamped. So I think that is, for me, goal orientation is orienting yourself, positioning yourself next to your goal. And that was something as a coxswain that I used all the time, is like small goals that you knew you could get, specific measurable goals. So
I love that.
And that has definitely trickled into the field of education, especially when we're looking at goal setting for educators and learning outcomes in their classrooms. But I also think from a child's perspective, when I think about goal orientation, I think about that child's individual disposition really towards completing the task or completing a specific goal that may be set. So while I wouldn't necessarily say, and there's all kinds of issues around, there can be issues around the ways in which we set goals with children. I would say more about completing a task that they may perceive as challenging or difficult. So how does that individual approach or orient themselves towards the completion of that particular task or goal?
I love that. And so let's go right into this idea of goal orientation. Now let's move into a phrase called task value, because you're alluding to it a bit. So you see, sounds like something that might be very keen on our motivation list.
Yes, and I think probably the way those piece together is the kind of the the incentive for engagement. So, what is it that's causing the child to take action? And that task value, they have to see that there is some reason for them to want to be engaged in that particular learning task.
Absolutely. Thank you. How about you, Lauri?
So it's, why should I do this? Why should I do this? And I think that, again, I'm going to pick on Holland a little more. He talked about it. That was the whole thing. You're going to go exercise. Well, why? For 40 years, you haven't really had a whole lot of reward on it. And then all of a sudden you've got this, why should I do it? You've got this trainer telling you, because it's going to be fun, because you're going to get a reward out of it. So whether that worked and, whether the, reward worked or not, it's having a value to the task, that there's some reason. I think about learning algebra in high school, and it's like, why should I learn this? And you have to figure out some reason. So it's the, why should I do this behind the task?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, the next word we're going to talk about, we've heard it become a buzzword, and I think it gets thrown around a lot, but maybe it may not be used correctly. So our last word for definition tonight is resilience. What do you think?
Well, I hope it's used correctly, or maybe I'm not using it correctly. I mean, it doesn't seem like a surprise word to me. It is a buzzword. I mean, I think resilience to me is being able to bounce back, being able to adapt. But I also think that it's the skills you need to be able to be resilient is really, Cece can talk about it from a school standpoint, but I think, again, from a business standpoint and a workplace standpoint, resilience is both the act of resilience of being able to bounce back, but also the self-awareness you need, the mindfulness you need, the self-care you need in order to be resilient. And how do you give people that resilience? Because it's not just there. You have to help people have it.
I earlier, just before we got started, we were talking about, I was coming off of another Zoom call, and we were discussing some data that we had looked at from the time that schools were closed until the end of the year, and just the challenges and the adaptations that teachers made in their teaching to rise to the challenges that were presenting themselves. And so when we think about resilience and the notion of adaptations in the kind of face of adversity, I think now more than ever, we are seeing educators who are resilient. Mm-hmm. I think what Lauri said about self-care is key, because as we continue to face those adversities, there are other factors that contribute to an ongoing sense of resiliency. And so some of that plays out in what Lauri said. I think, that notion of self-care feeds into resilience in a way that I don't really think about right off the bat. But when Lauri said that, and then I thought about, this earlier Zoom call where we were looking at the adaptations that teachers had made in that, 2-month period, and now how far they've come. It's because they've been resilient, and they teachers are often called to the work that they do. I keep coming back to what, was asked earlier about what keeps you up at night. I think any teacher who is truly committed to his or her job as a teacher, the success of the students, both socially, emotionally, and academically, really weighs on them. And so because we're seeing so much with our children right now, and in our own personal lives too, that notion of being able to be resilient over time, where you may be able to be resilient for a 2-month period. What does it look like now, on January 21st when we're still in this mess? And so that notion, like Lauri said, about self-care, I think feeds into our ability to continue to be resilient over time.
Well said. I couldn't agree with you both more. And I think we have seen this change over time in resilience and the ability to bounce back, maybe in different ways. Maybe we're bouncing differently in depending on our circumstance. And so I really appreciate these answers. Well done. This was exciting. Holland, do you feel more educated?
I'm always more educated in these conversations.
Great.
That's why we do this, because we learn something every week.
Absolutely.
So I know there is some discussion about, or debate maybe, about whether motivation is innate or something that's cultivated. Could you tell a story that might illustrate one of those sides of the debate, innate, cultivated? How about we start with you, Cece, and then Lauri?
Sure. So I'm married. I didn't say in my brief overview that I am married and have two fabulous children. That should always be my lead-in, I think, first, and I failed to do that. But my husband of 20 plus years is one of three boys, and the middle brother had some challenges in school, and is successful environmental engineer, but really had a mother who luckily was an educator by trade and spent countless hours working with him throughout his educational career to ensure that he met with success. He to this day does not like to read. He tells you, he's very open about the challenges that he faced, during his K-12 career, but also in college, reading content required for courses, just anything that was assigned reading. And really, like I said, will tell you that he hates to read. But I can't tell you the number of times that we've been together and I've seen him working on something out in the garage, and he has a technical manual out, and he's poring over that technical manual to solve, a jet ski that isn't running properly. And, I look at that technical manual and I think there is no way I could ever read that technical manual. Now, here is a person who admittedly has had challenges with reading and continues to have challenges, but will work their way through that technical manual to solve a problem at hand. So I definitely think that, it's both innate and can also be cultivated by interest and desire to solve a problem, or just out of a willingness to want to learn to do something.
So I'm going to jump right in for you because I thought a lot about this question, and I didn't have a real story that I could share as much as kind of some feedback about, I also am going to come to the place where I'm going to start at the beginning where Cece ended, which is I think that it is both innate and can be cultivated. And I think that it is cultivated by the task value. It is cultivated by the goals that you set. And I am going to talk about my kids, who the two of whom I'm the primary operator, and how remarkably different they are in terms of how motivated they are and what they're motivated to do and when they feel motivated. And so in the same way that, when your kids grow up and you're like, this one loves this food and this one hates this food, but they grew up in the same house. It's the same thing. You don't know what is behind it. But I look at my kids and I think that they are both very motivated. One of them, had her master's by the time she was 23 and is a very dedicated pharmaceutical researcher. And the other one struggled with school, as your brother-in-law sounds like, struggled with reading, says that he doesn't like to read, and, has worked very hard to be an electrician, which requires a great deal of learning and reading and memorizing and thinking and problem solving. So they both have been motivated to get where they wanted to do by the intrinsic value to them of what they wanted to reach. And so it was cultivated by their desire. Was it already in them? Probably. I think so, but I think that I think it is some of both. So
both and questions, don't we, Holland? It's a nice balance.
It is. I didn't know what to expect from an answer on that question, actually. I wouldn't have been willing to lay money on either answer, so.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, Cece, when I was going through some of my training as a reading recovery teacher, it probably was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. I remember that one of the challenges was getting us as adults to shift from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And so what have you found that helps you as an educator lead and challenge older students in this area of motivation?
Interestingly, I think when you say older students, I'm guessing you mean adults.
Adults.
Right? But I think that's one of the things that I've really learned from reading recovery is that a lot of the principles that guide our work with young children also guide our work with adults. Mm-hmm. So, things like putting an emphasis on the process instead of the product and helping children but children and adults see the need to be flexible, that there's more than one way to solve a problem. And that as a teacher, I have to help them find value in their half-right responses, that it isn't, right or wrong, that there is this, half-right response. And Mari Clay talks about that, in her work in reading recovery, that allows us to highlight the effort children are making towards solving a problem. And really, as a teacher, if I can, find and show the children value and adults value in those half-right responses and help support their problem solving, at just the right point. I'm not going to take over the task, but I'm also not going to, leave them floundering. That if I can find the ways in which to reinforce their problem solving, that feeds in turn their motivation to continue to work at the problem solving. So, I think that is the development of a growth mindset. Fixed is, it's too hard, I can't do it. Growth is, I'm on a continuum and it's my effort and the way that I continue to work at that problem solving that really cultivates a sense of purpose for children and adults alike to have kind of a stick with itness.
Excellent. I laugh when I start teach my pre-service teachers how to take running records on a blank piece of paper. And I preface it by saying, I know you're going to want to throw pencils at me. I wanted to throw pencils at my teacher. But what you can't do today, you will be able to do tomorrow. And I love that idea of a continuum. And yes, thank you. That's brilliant.
A lot of the conversation so far has been about children reading in the classroom. But motivation is something that happens, I think, across the lifespan and in lots of different contexts. So, Lauri, I'm interested. I read a study a few months ago that said something like 2 in 10 employees strongly agree that their performance is managed in a way that motivates them to do outstanding work. 2 in 10 strongly agree that their performance is managed in a way that motivates them to do outstanding work. How can a manager most effectively motivate their team in the business world?
Well, Holland, this is, first of all, I want to know what source that was, because they better not have been talking to anybody that works for me. Because motivating employees to feel good about their work and to feel proud of their work and to feel that they are doing their best work and that doing their work helps them be their best self is where I have spent all of my professional life. It's where I feel that's where I feel I need to be. So I hope that if those people that did that study, and I think personally that was fake news, but if those people that did that study came to work with my employees, I hope they would come up with better numbers. And I'm sure it's different on different days, but I think that the big things for me, the biggest thing, the very top of the list is lead by example. That's what a manager can do to motivate their employees to be in the trenches with them or to be at the top of the mountain with them. All of the things that we talked about at the top of the conversation, task value, showing them the task value. I think providing meaningful feedback. So not just feedback, not just this is happening or that's happening, but feedback that meets your employee where your employee is. So that knowing what feedback matters to each of your employees is really important. I think that a manager who wants to motivate their employees can't motivate them as a group as much as motivating each individual to understand what their task value is, what is their personal expectation, what is going to matter to them, and how can you give them feedback that helps them know whether they're hitting the mark. And again, I think, one of the reasons that I mentioned the rowing and the coxswain work is that I came to that as an adult. I was not a competitive rower in my youth or in college. I'm only 5'4". You do not row if you're 5'4". That's just a sidebar. But I came to it because it was a place to be a team, and I really wanted to be part of a team. I shifted from being a rower to being a coxswain, even though it meant I didn't get any exercise at 5 a.m, because I feel so good about learning how to motivate people and leading by example. And I was excited to have a new forum to do it. And it was so interesting for me to find that it was all the exact same stuff, that managing my employees was leading by example, that managing my rowing team was leading by example, that telling them what mattered in the job or telling you what matters in the boat. But I think that all of those things pull together, and that I know that what I want as an employee is to be given meaningful feedback and to show that what I do really matters. And so that's what I give them. I lead with that. So, but top of the list, lead by example. First manager I ever worked for said that to me, and I have lived by it as long as possible. Try to do that in your workplace and, when possible, in your life.
Oh, that's a fantastic answer. I sent you the source for that stat.
Okay.
But it was Gallup. But yeah, that was great. That was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So as we close out this first episode, we want to summarize, because we know, oftentimes that's the succinct part of learning is a summary. And so either one of you can start off, but what is an essential element that we need to consider about motivation?
I'll start. I would say definitely a sense of autonomy. So feeling of ownership and some control over the situation. I think that feeds into, for the work that I do, that children have a choice in their environment. And if we're thinking about, young children reading, how, they've got to learn to read. So am I putting a book in front of them because this is the right book for the child? I could say yes, like I'm going to make that choice for the child, but that takes that opportunity for them to have that perceived choice. And that's, I think, critical, a critical element as it relates to motivation. So, I think as an educator, it's thinking through all of these books present that same opportunity. So I can put several books down that are going to achieve the same thing from my standpoint, as far as the learning outcome is concerned, but that gives the child the choice of text selection on their side. So I'm not controlling that. The child is in control of that choice. And that is definitely going to contribute to their motivation and engagement with the text.
Wonderful. What do you think, Lauri?
I think Cece's great. I love listening to you speak, and I love that you started with ownership. I think that is really essential and kind of feeds back to what we've both been saying, both about motivating students at the youngest age, motivating your adult students, motivating employees, giving people their own personal connection to what it is that you want to be motivated about. And I think that it's the same, and I think we'll explore it a little bit more in the next batch of questions in part 2. But I think it's the same with the story Holland shared at the very beginning about exercise. I think bringing your own ownership to it is the only way that you're going to get moving forward. And so I think exploring the essential element, is hard to put your hand on. The essential element is yourself, I think. The essential element to motivation is what do I need, and what am I reaching for, and what am I getting from this, so that I can keep rolling forward with it.
I love that. I think that's one of the things we have to teach sometimes is we don't even know what we need. And so when you were talking also about self-care, sometimes that's part of that, is knowing that it's permissible to even think about needs and wants and that type of thing. So excellent.
Thanks so much, Cece and Lauri, for this conversation. For everyone else, while you wait for part 2, please go to theafterwordpodcast.com and become a subscriber. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, and tell your friends about us. As always, you are welcome at our table.